got a book about Charlotte neighborhoods, sorting out the new South City, race, class, and urban development in Charlotte. An essay exploring the history of U.S. shopping malls, a monthly newspaper column, food from home, and so much more. He was educated at Cornell University, University of Chicago, and UNC Chapel Hill. And he plays fiddle, as I understood earlier, he plays with Joan Foley's husband periodically, Parker. So we are happy to have Tom as our guest here today. He's an outstanding speaker. Tom, welcome.
A big thank you to Kelly and especially to Eric, who's the guy that's making this work right now. And it's probably a scary thing. Give him just a moment before he gets into the thing, but then I want you to give him a big round of applause, but only if we're sure that it's working.
Only if we're sure. We're sure.
Deserved applause,
Eric. Okay, that's okay.
All righty, Eric. So when should I quit? 12:30? Is that what we're at for?
We'll let you know.
Yeah,
About 22.
yeah, about 12:30, 12:35.
Okay, that sounds great. And if you need to go someplace, hey, you know, there's hours of history that I could regale you with, but I'm going to try not to do that. A pleasure being here. You guys have fun.
We try.
I do a lot of these talks where people are well, I don't know, I'm a shy person, and so I would probably be sitting here not talking to people. But you guys are talking to everybody. This is great. So I'm delighted to be here. And what I want to do is talk about where we are. If it was a little bit less warm outside, we could actually go for a walk because we are in a historic district. And so when COVID hit, you know, you could go for a walk, but that's about all you could do. So I went for a walk with my cell phone and have created 9 different walking tours of older Charlotte neighborhoods. I came here originally to Charlotte in 1981 to work at the Historic Landmarks Commission, at which point, Dilworth, oh, you don't want to go to Dilworth. It's not a good thing. Fourth Ward, you don't want to go to Fourth Ward. And Myers Park, oh, it's going down. It was amazing. And part of the reason that the neighborhoods have rebounded, there are a lot of reasons, but one is that they got in touch with their history. And so it's fun for me, 40-some years later, to walk through these neighborhoods and take pictures of the old houses and write down a little bit of the history so that folks who are new or folks who have been here a while, I can go on these little walking tours. So what I'm going to do is show you the walking tour, particularly for the Dilworth neighborhood, this part of Dilworth. Dilworth is so rich in history that I actually did 2 walking tours. One starts at the east-west station of the Links and takes you through the south end part of Dilworth. And this part is, we're kind of in the tour, kind of circling Latta Park, which is, if you haven't gone into the neighborhood, it's about 3-4 blocks that way. But these are designed to take you about an hour and to not be terribly strenuous and give you something to do. They've been quite popular. It's been pretty neat. So it is really appropriate to have this photograph here of the Dilworth Electric Railway streetcar because this is a streetcar suburb. And the photograph that's up on the screen right now, that's Edward Dilworth Latta, who, like nearly every other Charlottean, came here from someplace else. We have any native Charlotteans in the house? Give him a round of applause. But Edward Dilworth Latta came here to start a pants, he started a gentleman's clothing store, and then got into manufacturing pants, manufacturing trousers. And his operation was way out at the edge of town. It's basically the buildings that are the old Lance plant. You remember the old Lance plant that's just as you get down South Boulevard? Well, he built that factory out there and was able to buy like 400 acres of farmland right across from the factory. And it was so far out of town, you know, what can you do with with land, 400 acres of land that far out of Charlotte. Nobody's going to walk out there and buy a house. And at that point, electrification of streetcars was starting to happen. There had been horse-drawn streetcars, but they couldn't go very far because the horses get tired and you have to give them lemonade and give them massages and stuff like that. And it was just difficult to be. I'm pulling your leg, but anyway. And so he got Thomas Alva Edison. The light go on when you say Thomas Alva Edison. And came here and electrified the streetcar system. And all of a sudden, the 400 acres of land were worth big bucks because you could do suburbia. Before that, you couldn't do so. And so what this is a streetcar suburb that was developed by Edward Dilworth Latta. And it was developed in two chunks. The initial chunk is 1891, which is the part where Thomas Edison was here and big hoorah because Charlotte, finally was a big city because it had mass transit. But then in 1911, the city had grown enough so that a chunk of that land had not been developed. And he hired the Olmsted brothers. Name Olmsted mean anything to anybody? In the Central Park in New York, designed by Olmsted brothers' father. Fenway in Boston, designed by Biltmore. Nice little house up in the mountains. Landscaping designed by Chicago Park System, Chicago Boulevards, Olmsted. And the Olmsted sons picked up that family tradition. And in 1911, they did the curving street part of Dilworth. So if you go across the street, don't do this, you'll get killed. But you see what they're doing out there? But anyway, if one day you'll be able to walk across the street and walk up Dilworth Road. And that is a curving, natural kind of landscape that is the signature of the Olmsted brothers. So that's what we'll do here. And I will use two fingers to scroll. Theoretically, I will use two fingers to scroll. Let's see what happens if this happens. No. Eric. There you go. I just
I
wasn't
think it has to be the
Maybe I was
first,
going the
maybe it
wrong
has to be the
direction.
first two.
There we go.
There we
Maybe I used the wrong fingers. So we're going to start not here. We'll start where the tour starts, right on the park. How many folks have seen this sculpture? It's really close by here. It's 2 blocks away, 2 long blocks, and it is the actual rails of the streetcar. When the streetcar stopped running in the 1930s, most of the rails were just paved over. It wasn't economical to pull up all of that. And some of it did get pulled up in World War II and scrapped, sent over as bombers to Germany and Japan. But when they were doing some renovations about 10 years ago, they found a lot of the rails still under the tar there, and they were redoing the roads, and so they pulled them up. And they got a sculptor from Asheville named Robert Winkler to do this wonderful sculpture. And I just really like it because it's very modern and very historic at the same time, which is just about impossible to accomplish. And folks in the neighborhood like it so much that there's a Dilworth filmmaker named Don Devitt. And one of the delights of having a walking tour that's online, besides the fact that you can do it anytime you want to, you can walk or you can stay in your home, but we can do things like links to that video. So as you start there, you walk up Dilworth Road. We're going to now walk kind of towards us here. And one of the first houses is kind of a culinary landmark if you're my age. Anybody remember the S&W cafeterias? That's Mr. S's house. Frank Sherrill and his partner, Fred Weber, were World War I soldiers. And they got into mass production of food because that was their job in the military. And when they came out, they said, I bet you people would pay for our food. Now, that's kind of counterintuitive because military foods are not supposed to be very good, but they must have done quite well. At that point, there was not fast food. There were almost no restaurants. And so what they did is they opened up on West Trade Street, 1 block off the square, and up into living memory, that was the restaurant. If you went to the Center City, you went to the S&W cafeteria, they had branches at the shopping malls. They were eventually all over the South. There were, I think, several hundred of those restaurants. And by 1929, or 1928, he had enough money to build this nice little house here in the neighborhood. Some of you may remember the engineer and civic activist Pete Verna. If you're my age, that may mean something. Pete Verna is the guy that took that house over and lived there for many years and made it continue as a landmark. So if you go up the street, you see another nice suburban house from the 1920s. This was the home of an accountant named George Scott, who had initially settled in 4th Ward. Suburbia was a new thing. Most folks with money in the 19th century lived in what we would now consider downtown, because people were walking. But now by the 1920s, people even have automobiles. And so Scott moved his family out here to that house, and his son was Randolph Scott. Folks ever seen the Randolph Scott movie? Yeah. Randolph, yeah. And there's, of course, there's the Oak Ridge Boys hit song from the 1970s, Whatever Happened to Randolph Scott, which was the hokiest song on radio until Achy Breaky Heart. And I'm kind of sad to see us lose our proximity in that, but there you go. If for those of you who haven't seen Randolph Scott, he was kind of the Arnold Schwarzenegger of his time. He made lots and lots of movies, and he always played variations on the same character, who was an upstanding military kind of guy. He was usually a cowboy, except during World War I, he was a military officer and incredibly handsome. And so there he is. And he would come home every once in a while and hang out at the home on Dilworth Road. You go a little bit further, you come to Presbyterian Church, Covenant Presbyterian Church. Of course, this is a Presbyterian town. Those of you who are Baptist and anti-Zion and all of that, no offense, but so many Presbyterians here and very well-to-do folks. I had not known the history of this church architecturally until we did the walking tour. I knew it as the Church of JNP's developed. And anybody old enough here to remember JNP's? JNP's was a civic leader. He lived into his late 90s when it was a very unusual thing, and was the architect who designed and created the Central Piedmont Community College campus, a lot of campuses at places like UNC. And when he came to do this church, this is what I didn't know. He partnered with Graham and Ferguson, who are, when I heard that, bing. If you've been to Boston, you know the John Hancock Tower. There are 2 of them. There's one, a new one from the 1960s, but the old one from 1946 is by Graham and Ferguson. If you've been to Princeton, there's evidently a whole college up there in Princeton. They designed about a dozen of the buildings. If you've been to West Point, they designed the Cadets Chapel. They designed the headquarters building. And so we've got just a little bit of their work. Wellesley, Swarthmore. Wow. And so that is a beautiful church that looks like it's from the 1920s, but it's actually from 1952. Across the way from that, our building, the building that we're in right now, is the red brick building in the distance. If you walk across one day when it's safe to do that, you'll see this little park plaza that was given in honor of Joe and Joanne Martin, Joan Martin rather. Joe Martin, one of the key people in building Bank of America into a coast-to-coast bank. He and Joan Martin gave the money, among many other things, for Imaginon, the children's library downtown. And now we're very close to where we are. This is the Charlotte Women's Club, which, again, a huge deal. Today, I'm going to look out here. I can remember when Rotary was only guys. And only white guys in the Rotaries that I work. And y'all have created a revolution. And that revolution, which you see here, starts with women's clubs. In the early 20th century, women were barely allowed to vote. Were not in government in any official way. And so, doggone it, they organized and created task forces which dealt with things like getting a building code for Charlotte. I mean, most of us have toilets in our houses, right? That's a new thing in the 20th century. And it was women who organized to make that happen. And the Charlotte Women's Club was where they did a lot of that organizing. Beautiful building by C.C. Hook, who was Charlotte's first college-trained architect, who did things like the City Hall on East Trade Street and the Duke Mansion in Myers Park. So really distinguished piece of architecture there, right next to us as well. There is Dilworth Road in a postcard, looking back towards where we currently are. We're right this moment, right about there. And in the distance is the Addison building, which I'll talk about in a minute. But this was a special space because of the Olmsteds, because of the upscale folks who lived here, and commemorated on a postcard. The Addison building was our first high-rise apartment building. This was built in 1920s when there was a real estate boom and people were willing to do strange stuff that had never been done in southern cities, including building high-rise apartment buildings. And that today is an office tower. It's a historic landmark here locally. And it is across the street from the Duke Endowment, which is a new building. The Duke Endowment, of course, one of the biggest philanthropic organizations in the United States, not just in the South. They're managing billions of dollars of money seeded by James B. Duke, the guy that invented the mass-produced cigarette, okay? and also Duke Energy. They fund a lot of Methodist churches. They fund a lot of hospitals. They fund 4 colleges and universities: Davidson, Johnson C. Smith, Furman, and there's evidently a 4th university, college, whatever, that Duke founded over near Chapel Hill. So there it is. And what I want this to do is refresh. There it is. Okay, it was just shot. So how are we doing on time? We're doing, we're going to cut off a little bit of this, but I want to show you some of the cool stuff as you go around back towards, up that way, back towards the park. This is the Myrtle Apartments. And the Addison apartments in the 1920s, the first high-rise apartments. The Myrtle is the first garden apartments. The whole idea of garden apartments was a cutting-edge thing that planners and developers were working on in the 1930s. And then the New Deal came along. FHA would help you with a loan if you wanted to do something like that. And so a beautiful example of modernist architecture from the 1930s, and still incredibly desirable today, the Myrtle Apartments. So as we come around, we end up at the Latta Park, named for Edward Dilworth Latta. The original park was much larger. It was literally an amusement park with a Ferris wheel and a dance pavilion and all of that, because Latta was running the streetcar system, and the streetcars were running all the time, and that cost money. And he needed people to sit on the streetcars and pay him a nickel. And so he mainly built it to sell house lots, because if people could ride out here. But how do you get them to sit on the car otherwise? Put an amusement park at the end of the line. And by the 19-teens, that was no longer, he didn't need that any longer. And so he shrank the park and created a naturalistic park, which is what you see here. That's part of the Olmsted's redesign of the neighborhood. And I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit. See if this will pick up for me. There we go. I want to talk about some impressive religious buildings. Here we go. This may be the most diverse corner in terms of religion here in Charlotte, though I can tell you some places on the east side that are about as diverse. This is a Buddhist meditation center. And it is right there on East Boulevard. And it was originally the annex to the Greek Orthodox Cathedral. The Greek folks were about the only major immigrant group to come here until the 1990s when we really became an immigrant center. But for a long time, we were the regional residents of the bishop for the whole Southeast. And that's the church that was built, of course, the Greek Orthodox Cathedral. But the bishop's residence was across the street, and there was a little chapel there as well. And when he moved to Atlanta, because there are better airport connections, it became a Buddhist center. I love that. And of course, you want diversity in your neighborhood. And so here is Dilworth Methodist, funded with a small grant from Mr. Duke himself. And the architecture is very similar to Duke University, Duke Chapel, and all of that. So that Gothic, collegiate Gothic kind of thing. So questions, comment? Yes.
All welcome.
So let me just show a couple more slides because we were coming up on 12:30. The delight for me of Dilworth is its diversity. There are many different kinds of building types. It's very walkable. You want to walk to the paper skyscraper? Yeah. You want to walk to Dilworth Grill? Yeah. You want to walk to church? You want to walk to a Buddhist meditation center? You want to walk to nightclubs? It's really cool. And it is one of the neighborhoods that continued the tradition of multifamily in the neighborhood alongside of Singapore. If you go up and down the straight square streets of Dilworth, you'll see that old pattern with things like the Myrtle Apartments, but also with these quadruplexes. This is the characteristic small rental space in Charlotte. And there's a lot of these in Dilworth. And so I really enjoy that. And I enjoy the bungalows with their porches, very welcoming kind of places. And that's the delight of Dilworth is that all of that diversity has allowed it to flourish over time. It is a neighborhood that has become, in my time, beloved again. There's a book that was written on its 100th anniversary that you can find at the library. And yes, I'll stop there. Questions, comments? Yes.
I love the walking tours. How do you access those?
They're online at www.historysouth.org. And what we're doing right here, thanks to the magic of Eric, is we're actually on the walking tour. This is the same thing you can do on your phone or at home. You know, this is not a presentation. This is not a presentation I created for you. This is the actual walking tour. No, it is all written there. We've talked about finding somebody who would do an audio track.
Oh, so you're reading it as you walk?
Yeah, you can read it as you walk. And it's all short stuff. So you probably want to stand rather than walk, because you'll trip on the sidewalk. But yeah, you can do it anytime. I love it. Do it. I would love to do an audio. Somebody set me up for that.
Tom, can you repeat the question for the folks online?
Okay. And I'm walking away from the camera. I apologize for doing that. The question was, is there an audio version of this talk? And no, there isn't. But it would be a great idea. So somebody who's sitting at home can figure out how to make that happen. Let me know. Yes.
There was a slide, you went by a picture that said, I thought it said Dilworth Road East and Park Avenue. I don't know what the picture was on.
Let's see.
There was a couple, I didn't know why, but it said something about.
Here. Is this it?
So,
There we go. Park Road, Park Avenue. This is Dilworth's contribution to the confusing streets thing. Do you notice streets in Charlotte are confusing? Well, the Park Avenue was the street that went around Latta Park. And Park Road was an older street that went way out south. And because, you know, who was going to get confused about that? They're two very different roads. But of course, today we have lots of confusing roads. And so this is the nub of that confusion.
What I was gonna tell you was in the corner of Park Avenue and Dilworth Road East, I believe, which is the end of Ladder Park now, there's a big garden there. And that's our Rotary Club garden. I don't know.
Okay. I don't know that history.
Yes, it's, if you come up the split in the road by the statue, by the streetcar statue, turn right, and then just right there in the corner, there's a big garden that Dilworth Rotary put in 2001.
Beautiful.
And we
Thank you.
support that.
And he's talking about the Dilworth Rotary Garden in Ladder Park, which you all are still maintaining. Right? Excellent.
We are the supporters of that with the Parks and Rec.
One more? Anybody? One more?
Yes.
Yes.
One more. Tom, our club was established in 1948. It was the first Charlotte club to spin off from the big Charlotte Rotary Club. Most of the people who were members at that time were in the manufacturing industry and had locations in the Dilworth area. Do you have any knowledge of those manufacturers in Dilworth at the time?
It's possible to find that out pretty easily through the city directories, which come out every year. They're kind of like a phone book used to be, except they've got all sorts of, you know, who worked for who kind of information, and they're all online. So if you Google Charlotte City Directory and whatever year you want, there are actually a couple of versions of them that'll pop up, and the interface is really nice. You can just flip through the pages, and there's an alphabetical section that would list, you know, Hanchett Tom, spouse Carol, working. I don't know what they would put, not much probably. I'm retired, but there's also a street address. So if you came down Dilworth Road, you could see that you know, this person lived here and that person lived next door. And it's a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Cool. And I see more hands. By the way, let me show you a couple of cool books. I wrote a history of Charlotte, and it's the sorting out the New South City. And then my friend Pamela Grundy wrote a history of African American stuff going on in this city. And it's intentionally short as an introduction. So let me pass those around and folks get interested in do that. Yes.
So just a quick comment. It was fascinating learning the history of it. So when you mentioned the women's club, so who knows what one of the first Rotary projects was?
No idea.
In Chicago.
Oh, yeah, it was the restrooms.
The public restrooms, and the reason for it was that the men would take their wives with them, and the wives wanted to go shopping in Chicago, and there was no restrooms, so that started the first public restroom.
Wow. I love that. I love that.
Happy wife, happy life.
I saw a couple other hands.
I'm very fond of going on guided tours. Are there any guided tours here in Charlotte?
Are there guided tours of Charlotte? There is the Charlotte Segway Tour. And they both do walking tours and Segway tours. I've never been on a Segway, it looks scary, but they do that. There's also a comedy bus tour called the Funny Bus. And they go past my house every day and they laugh. I have no idea what they're saying on the bus. But in terms of a tour like this, they don't really exist. And so somebody should start that.
Sounds like an opportunity.
I will take groups. If somebody really wants that to happen, let me know and I'll make it happen. Be happy to do it to your group. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And, Mr. President, I'll report you back.
Before you leave, we just want to say thank you on behalf of our club. We have these personalized thank you guest speaker cups designed in particular for you, but we really appreciate you being here today.
That's it, yeah.
Oh, don't say that. Oh, yeah, come on down. We have one more duty for you. If you can pick out the winning.
There we go.
If it's David, you're fired.
And then if you could just announce the last three numbers, that would be great.
Speaker. 300. 300. 300.
No, you're not.
All of it, right? Thank you, Tom. How about another round of applause for Tom?
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Tom. That was very interesting, as always, with all of your speech. In fact, I think when we heard you the first time, we saw you at the library, Kevin and I did. And it was after that that we had you here. So pass up the cart bucket, please, and then stand up and we'll do the 5-way test. Other things we think, say, or do, number 1. Number 2. Consider. Number 3. Number 4.
Would be beneficial to all concerned.
And number 5. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and thank you all online. We're glad you have this. So enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye.
No.
Oh.